Alongside the personal grief that all my family are feeling, we also share with so many of you in the United Kingdom, in all the countries where the Queen was head of state.
For decades, the British monarchy has mastered the art of silence, but some secrets refuse to stay buried. Under the cover of darkness, a routine night aboard Camilla's private yacht took a shocking turn when an unexpected discovery sent shockwaves straight to the palace. What began as a quiet moment quickly spiraled into a crisis no one saw coming. Whispers of a hidden truth, locked away for over 30 years, are now impossible to ignore. So, what exactly was found? And why is it causing such an uproar now? The night the silence broke. On a cold night in March 2026, the skies over London were thick with dark clouds, pressing low as though they carried a secret. The wind moved restlessly through the city, bringing with it a sharp chill from the sea. Streets were quiet, lights dim, and everything appeared unusually still, almost as if the world itself was holding its breath. At first glance, nothing seemed out of place. The calm felt natural, even peaceful, but beneath that calm, something unseen was waiting. Miles away from the public eye, far from the noise of the city and the constant attention of the media, a private royal yacht known as Windsor Grace floated gently near the coast of Brighton. It was no ordinary vessel. Elegant, carefully designed and heavily secured, it was a personal retreat, a gift from King Charles III to Queen Camilla. The yacht was meant to be a sanctuary, a place where the pressures of royal life could fade, even if only for a moment. Out there on the quiet waters, it seemed like the perfect escape. No cameras, no crowds, no questions, just silence and the steady rhythm of the sea. But that silence would not last. At exactly 1:47 a.m., something changed. Without warning, a piercing signal cut through the stillness. A red alert triggered within the royal security system. This was not a routine check or a minor technical fault. The system, built with advanced technology, monitored every movement through a network of sensors, cameras, and tracking devices. It was designed to detect the smallest irregularity, and now it had found one. The alert was clear, sharp, impossible to ignore. An intrusion had been detected, not somewhere distant, not in a surrounding area, but directly at the location of the yacht itself. In an instant, the quiet night transformed into something else entirely. What had felt calm just moments before now carried a sense of urgency, even danger. Deep within secured control rooms, alarms flashed, screens lit up, and attention shifted immediately to one point on the map, Windsor Grace. Operators leaned forward, eyes fixed, trying to understand what they were seeing. The data coming in was precise, almost unsettling in its accuracy. This was no random movement, no harmless error. Something, or someone, had crossed into a space that was meant to be untouchable. Within seconds, communication lines opened. Voices, once calm, became focused and firm. Protocols were activated. Every second now mattered. Out on the water, the yacht remained still, gently rocking with the waves, giving no outward sign of the disruption unfolding around it. From a distance, it looked unchanged, peaceful even. But beneath that appearance, an invisible line had been crossed. Back in the control centers, tension grew. How had this happened? The royal security system was not easily breached. It had layers of protection, each one designed to prevent exactly this kind of situation. Yet somehow, something had slipped through. That realization alone was enough to raise concern. Then came the deeper question, the one no one could ignore. Who was responsible? Was this a mistake? A test gone wrong? Or something far more serious? As more data began to stream in, the situation only became more unsettling. The signal was not fading. It was steady, deliberate. Whatever had triggered the alert was still there. Watching, moving, present. Time seemed to stretch, even as everything around moved faster. Each second felt heavier, and decisions had to be made quickly, yet with great care. Every action now mattered more than before, as if the smallest step could change everything. The quiet of the night was no longer peaceful. It had been replaced by a strange tension in the air. A deep sense of mystery began to grow, along with a soft but unsettling fear of what might come next. What started as an ordinary night had shifted into something unforgettable, and as the system kept tracking the intrusion, one truth stood out clearly. This was only the beginning of something far bigger, and no one knew where it would lead. What must have happened? Was there any detected intrusion? What did the security discover? Let's find out. The search that revealed nothing and everything. Within minutes, the stillness of the night was shattered. Sleek security boats sliced through the dark waters, their engines low but urgent, carrying elite officers toward a single destination. Every man on board knew the gravity of the situation. This was no routine check. The alarm they had received was precise, calculated, and impossible to ignore. Somewhere on that yacht, something, or someone, had triggered a response that demanded immediate action. They arrived swiftly, surrounding the vessel with practiced coordination. Lights swept across its polished surface, revealing nothing out of place. From the outside, the yacht appeared calm, almost serene, gently rocking with the rhythm of the water. But the silence only deepened the tension. With controlled movements, the team boarded. They expected chaos, signs of intrusion, evidence of a struggle, even the faintest clue that someone had been there. But what they found instead was far more unsettling. Nothing. No shattered glass glittering on the floor, no doors forced open, no furniture overturned, no hurried footprints or disturbed objects. Everything was exactly where it should be, perfectly arranged, almost unnaturally so. Cushions sat neatly in place. Surfaces gleamed undisturbed. It was as though time itself had paused inside the yacht, preserving a scene of complete normalcy. And yet, the system had been triggered. That contradiction hung heavily in the air. At the center of the operation stood Colonel Robert Harland, a man whose reputation had been built over decades of experience in high-risk security operations. He was not easily shaken, nor was he prone to exaggeration. His instincts had been sharpened by years of dealing with real threats, situations where a single overlooked detail could mean disaster. He scanned the room slowly, his eyes narrowing. "There are no false alarms," he said firmly, his voice cutting through the quiet. It wasn't just a statement. It was a principle he had lived by. If the system had reacted, then something had caused it. Simple as that. The team exchanged brief glances, silently acknowledging his words. This was no time for assumptions. The absence of evidence was not evidence of absence. If anything, it made the situation more dangerous. They moved deeper into the yacht. Step by step, room by room, they searched. The living area, clear. The dining space, untouched. The corridors, silent and still. They checked behind doors, inside storage compartments, beneath furniture, every possible hiding place. Their movements were precise, disciplined, almost mechanical. Yet beneath that discipline was a growing unease. The deeper they went, the more the calm began to feel unnatural, staged even. It was too perfect. Finally, they approached the master bedroom. The air seemed heavier there, as if the space itself held its breath. The door opened slowly. At first glance, it mirrored the rest of the yacht, immaculate, orderly, undisturbed. The bed was neatly made, the surfaces clean, every detail in place. But something felt different, subtle, almost impossible to explain, yet undeniable. The team spread out, scanning the room with heightened focus. And then, something caught their attention. Along one wall stood a bookshelf, carefully arranged with books placed in deliberate order. At a casual glance, it appeared ordinary, blending seamlessly into the elegant design of the room. But to trained eyes, something was off. It was too deliberate, too precise. One of the officers stepped closer, examining it more carefully. There, tucked just out of immediate sight, partially concealed behind the alignment of books, was something unexpected, a small black box. It wasn't large. It wasn't flashy. In fact, it looked almost insignificant at first glance. Plain, unremarkable. But its placement told a different story. It had not been forgotten there. It had not been carelessly dropped. It had been positioned, carefully, intentionally. Every instinct in the room sharpened at once. This object did not belong. Colonel Harland stepped forward, his eyes locked on the box. The air around them grew heavier, as if the entire yacht had been holding its breath. waiting for this exact moment, waiting for someone to finally notice what had been hiding in plain sight. No one dared to speak. Silence wrapped around the team like a tight grip. In that quiet, a shared realization spread through them. The alarm had not failed. It had been triggered for a reason. Something had truly happened here. And worse still, it was not random. It was deliberate, carefully arranged by someone who knew exactly what they were doing. Every detail now pointed to intention, not accident, and that truth tightened the tension even further. What might have caused the alarm to ring? Were they able to identify it? Let's dive into the details of the object that sent everyone back to history. The box that reopened the past. Under the glow of powerful floodlights, the deck shimmered like a stage set for something far more than an ordinary evening. The sea stretched endlessly into darkness, calm yet heavy with an unspoken tension. At the center of it all sat a single object, a box. It was not large, yet it carried a presence that drew every eye toward it. Quietly, almost ceremoniously, it was brought forward and placed where everyone could see. Then, slowly, it was opened. Inside, resting on a bed of deep, luxurious velvet, lay a collection of jewelry so exquisite that time itself seemed to pause. Each piece caught the light in a way that felt almost deliberate, as though they were revealing themselves after years of silence. They were elegant, they were historic, and for those who recognized them, they were unmistakable. These treasures had once belonged to Diana, Princess of Wales. A delicate pearl necklace, glowing softly with timeless grace. Diamond earrings that sparkled with a brilliance impossible to ignore, and a sapphire bracelet, rich in color, bold in presence, and deeply symbolic. But these were never just ornaments. They carried meaning. They told a story. They were reminders of a woman who had captured the hearts of millions across the world, a woman whose compassion, warmth, and humanity had left a mark that time could not erase. Even years after her passing, her memory remained alive, not just in photographs or documentaries, but in the emotions people still felt when her name was mentioned. And yet, what made this moment truly unsettling was not just the beauty of the pieces, but their history, because these items were never supposed to be here. In fact, they were never supposed to be seen again. They had vanished in 1997. On the very day of Diana's funeral, a day when grief filled the air and the world stood still in mourning, these jewels disappeared without a trace. It was a moment of global sorrow, when attention was fixed on loss, remembrance, and farewell. Behind the scenes, security was overwhelmed, stretched beyond its limits by the sheer scale of the event and the emotions surrounding it. And somewhere within that chaos, these priceless pieces were gone. No clear answers, no confirmed sightings, no closure. For nearly 30 years, they remained missing, not hidden in a museum, not recovered in a private collection, not even rumored with certainty, simply gone. Until now, because against all expectation, against all logic, they had resurfaced, and not just anywhere, but aboard the private yacht of Queen Camilla. The discovery did not come with explanations. There were no immediate statements, no clarifications, no comforting narratives to make sense of what had just been revealed. Instead, there was silence, a deep, heavy silence, the kind that lingers longer than words ever could. Because this was no longer just about missing jewelry. It was about questions that refused to stay buried. How had these pieces disappeared so completely at such a critical moment in history? Who had taken them? And why had they remained hidden for so long? And perhaps most unsettling of all, how had they found their way here, to a place so unexpected, so closely tied to another chapter of the same royal story? The air on that deck seemed to shift. What had begun as a simple unveiling had transformed into something far more complex, far more troubling. This was no longer a discovery. It was a disruption, a reopening of a past many believed had already been laid to rest. Because history, no matter how distant it may seem, has a way of returning, often when least expected, and in ways no one can fully explain. What are Princess Diana's things doing in Camilla's yacht? How did they get there? Let's dig into the face-off between the two, as narrated by one of the shocked ex-royal guards. Princess Diana's courageous confrontation. Earlier this year, Ken Worf, once Princess Diana's personal bodyguard, reflected on one of the most intense and emotional moments he experienced while serving her. He recalled a tense, unforgettable evening at a party hosted by Annabel Elliott. What seemed like an ordinary social gathering quickly unfolded into something far more serious. The atmosphere carried a sense of unease, and the events of that night would go on to mark a quiet but important shift in royal history. Worf's memories offer a rare glimpse into the private world behind palace doors, revealing the pressure, emotions, and hidden tensions deeply surrounding Diana during a time when every moment seemed to matter. It shows how closely watched her life truly was. Diana's appearance at the party caught many guests off guard. It wasn't expected that she would attend, and her sudden arrival stirred curiosity and unease among those present. Yet, despite the whispers and sideways glances, she carried herself with calmness and quiet dignity. Beneath that composed exterior, however, was a woman driven by a need for clarity and truth. As the evening unfolded, Diana noticed something troubling. Prince Charles was nowhere to be seen. Her concern quickly grew, and she turned to Worf, asking him to help find her husband. There was a sense of urgency in her request, as though she already suspected what they might discover. Together, they moved through the rooms, searching discreetly but purposefully. Eventually, their search led them to a more private area of the house. There, away from the main gathering, Charles was found in the company of Camilla Parker Bowles. The atmosphere in that moment was heavy, almost frozen in time, as the reality of the situation became undeniable. What happened next was not a scene of avoidance or quiet withdrawal. Instead, Diana made a decision that would define her strength in that moment. She chose to confront the situation directly. With remarkable courage, she approached Camilla and spoke openly. There was no shouting, no loss of control, but her words carried a powerful emotional weight. She made it clear that she understood what had been happening behind the scenes. She refused to be deceived or dismissed, firmly expressing that she would not be treated as though she were unaware or insignificant. Worf later described this confrontation as one of the bravest acts he had ever witnessed from Diana. It was not just about what she said, but how she said it, with honesty, vulnerability, and a quiet strength that revealed both her pain and her dignity. In that moment, she was not just a princess bound by royal expectations. She was a woman standing up for herself in the face of deep personal hurt. Camilla's response, as recalled by Worf, was calm but somewhat distant and difficult to fully interpret. There was no clear apology or attempt to deny what was happening. Instead, her reaction suggested a level of acceptance, even inevitability, about her relationship with Charles. It was a response that spoke volumes without saying much, reinforcing the idea that the situation had gone far beyond secrecy or uncertainty. This brief but powerful exchange exposed the deep cracks within Diana and Charles's marriage. What had long been the subject of speculation was now undeniable, even if only witnessed by a few. The emotional distance, the unresolved tensions, and the competing loyalties all came into sharp focus in that single moment. In hindsight, this encounter is often seen as a critical turning point. It marked the point where the fragile balance within their relationship could no longer be maintained. The events of that night contributed to a chain reaction that would eventually lead to their separation, and years later, their official divorce in 1996. More than anything, this story highlights the complexity of Diana's experience. She was not only a global figure admired for her grace and compassion, but also a woman navigating profound personal challenges. Her actions that night revealed a mix of bravery and vulnerability, qualities that made her deeply human and widely relatable. Ultimately, the confrontation stands as a defining moment in one of the most widely followed and discussed relationships in modern royal history. It offers a glimpse into the emotional reality behind the public image, reminding us that even within the grandeur of royalty, deeply personal struggles can unfold with lasting consequences. How did William feel about the discovery? What was his reaction like? Let's take a look at the details of how William handled the situation. William and the impossible encounter. When the call reached Prince William, everything seemed to tilt at once. One moment, life was moving as expected. The next, a quiet but powerful shift had taken place. It wasn't just the urgency in the voice on the other end, it was what the message carried. Instantly, he understood something deeper than anyone else could. What had been reported was not ordinary. It was not something that could be brushed aside or explained away easily. To others, the items in question might have appeared as nothing more than valuable royal possessions, historical pieces, carefully preserved and admired. But to him, they meant far more than that. These were not just objects made of gold or studded with stones. They carried emotion. They held memories. They were connected to his mother in a way that words could hardly capture. Each piece told a story. They had been part of her life, moments she lived, events she attended, memories she created. They were symbols of who she was, not just as a public figure, but as a person. To lose them, or to see them suddenly reappear under strange circumstances, was not just confusing. It was deeply personal. Later, standing alone with his thoughts, William tried to process everything. The noise of the moment had faded, leaving behind a heavy silence. It was in that stillness that the truth began to settle in his mind. He spoke softly, almost to himself, but with a clarity that cut through the confusion. "These things didn't just appear," he said. The words hung in the air, simple but loaded with meaning. They carried a realization that couldn't be ignored. Objects like these do not move on their own. They do not vanish and return without reason. Someone had been involved. Someone had made a decision. Someone put them there. That single thought changed everything. What might have first seemed like a strange coincidence now felt entirely different. This was no accident. There was no room for chance here. The idea that this could have happened randomly no longer made sense. Every detail pointed in one direction. This was done on purpose. And that was the most troubling part. If it was deliberate, then it meant there was intention behind it. Careful thought, planning. Whoever was responsible had not acted without thinking. They had chosen their moment. They had understood the risks. And yet, they had gone ahead anyway. Even more unsettling was the next realization that followed. This was not something just anyone could have done. Access would have been required. Real, close access. Not the kind available to strangers or outsiders. This suggested something far more concerning. Whoever was behind this knew the system. They understood how things worked. They knew where to go, what to do, and how to avoid being noticed. This wasn't a random act carried out in the dark by someone guessing their way through. No, this was something else entirely. As the investigation slowly began to unfold, the situation grew even more serious. Details started to emerge, each one more disturbing than the last. Security cameras, which should have captured everything, had been turned off. Not damaged, not broken, but deliberately disabled. Systems that were meant to protect and monitor had been quietly bypassed. This wasn't luck. This wasn't chance. This was skill. Whoever had done this had taken their time. They had moved with care and precision. Every step suggested knowledge and experience. There was no panic, no rush, only control. It became clear that this was not the work of someone acting on impulse. This was not a careless mistake or a desperate move. It was calculated, planned from beginning to end, professional, intentional. And as that truth settled in, one question grew louder than the rest. If it wasn't an outsider, then who was it? Could there be more to the discovery? Are there hidden facts that seem to complicate everything? Let's find out about the outcome of the investigation. The hidden truth begins to surface. A breakthrough in the investigation came from a source that had been ignored for a long time. One small but powerful piece of evidence. It was a hidden camera, placed quietly months earlier, unnoticed by everyone around. At the time, it did not seem important, but as investigators revisited all the collected materials, this single recording became the key to unlocking the entire mystery. When the footage was carefully examined, it revealed something shocking. In the dark of night, a figure appeared, moving carefully and avoiding attention. The person boarded the yacht with quiet confidence, as though they had done it before or had been given clear instructions. There was no rush, no sign of panic, only deliberate and controlled movements. The figure was carrying a box. It was not large, but it was handled with great care, almost as though its contents were very important or sensitive. The person placed the box in a specific spot, ensuring it was secure and hidden from plain sight. After completing the task, the individual left the same way they came, silently, without leaving any obvious trace behind. This discovery immediately changed the direction of the investigation. With this new visual evidence, it became possible to track and identify the person seen in the footage. After careful analysis and cross-checking, the man was identified as Marcus Hale, someone who had long been associated with the royal household and was not unfamiliar to those working within those circles. Once identified, Marcus Hale was called in for questioning. At first, he firmly denied any involvement. He acted calm and confident, insisting that he had nothing to do with the incident. However, as investigators presented more evidence, especially the footage, his confidence began to weaken. The questions became harder to answer, and the evidence became harder to dismiss. Eventually, the pressure reached a point where denial was no longer possible. The truth began to surface. In a moment that shifted the entire course of the investigation, he finally spoke. His voice was low, but his words carried great weight. "I was following orders." This statement immediately raised even more questions. Investigators pressed further, asking him to reveal who had given the orders. There was a long pause. The room seemed to grow still as everyone waited for his response. It was clear that what he was about to say could change everything. After a moment of hesitation, he finally spoke a name. The name he gave sent shockwaves through the room: Queen Camilla. At that point, the investigation took on a much deeper and more complex dimension. What initially appeared to be a simple case was now connected to a larger story, one that may have roots stretching back many years. As investigators began to piece together the possible background, attention turned to the past, particularly to the period following the tragic death of Diana, Princess of Wales, in 1997. Her passing had a profound impact on the world, and it also shifted public focus toward the relationship between Prince Charles and Camilla. During that time, public opinion was intense and often unforgiving. People constantly compared Diana and Camilla, and the contrast between them became a subject of widespread discussion. Diana was deeply loved and remembered as a symbol of grace, compassion, and strength. Her image remained powerful in the hearts of many, almost untouchable. Camilla, on the other hand, faced a very different journey. She had to deal with public criticism, judgment, and the heavy weight of comparison. It was not an easy path, and for a long time, she struggled to find acceptance and her place within the royal narrative. Over the years, things slowly began to change. Public perception softened, and Camilla gradually gained acceptance. She worked to build her role and presence within the royal family, becoming more recognized and acknowledged over time. Yet, despite this progress, some believe that the past never fully fades away. The pressures, the public scrutiny, and the emotional weight of earlier years may still linger beneath the surface. And it is within this complex backdrop that the current events began to raise even more questions about motives, history, and the unseen forces that may still be at play. How did King Charles feel about the glaring evidence? What would be the fate of Camilla and those who were involved? Does there seem to be a way out of this? Let's delve further into the details. A royal reckoning. The final stage arrived quietly, almost without notice, but it carried enormous weight. A private meeting was arranged behind closed doors. No cameras were watching, no journalists waiting outside, no public speeches to explain what was about to unfold. It was just a small group of trusted individuals gathered in a room where every word spoken mattered deeply. Among them were King Charles III and Prince William, both present not as public figures, but as individuals facing a serious and delicate truth. The evidence was then presented. It was not rushed. It was not emotional. It was carefully organized, clearly explained, and supported by facts that could not be easily ignored or dismissed. Every detail was laid out with precision, leaving little room for confusion or doubt. As the information unfolded, the atmosphere in the room grew heavier. What had once been speculation or quiet concern was now something solid, something real. At first, there were efforts to respond. Some tried to explain the situation. Others attempted to soften the impact of what was being revealed. A few even tried to question or deny parts of it, hoping to create some distance between themselves and the growing truth. But none of those responses could hold for long. The facts were steady, consistent, and undeniable. Slowly, the room began to change. Then came silence. Not an empty silence, but one filled with realization. a silence that often follows when people begin to understand that the truth cannot be avoided any longer. And in that quiet moment, emotion finally broke through. "I was afraid," Camilla admitted in a soft and honest voice, afraid of never truly belonging. It was a deeply human moment, a moment of vulnerability, showing fear, uncertainty, and the desire to be accepted. Her words revealed more than just a reaction to the present situation. They hinted at a longer struggle within her, one tied to identity, acceptance, and the weight of public life. But while the confession carried emotional honesty, it did not remove the seriousness of what had already happened. The past could not be rewritten by words alone. For King Charles, this moment was deeply personal. It touched not only his role as a leader, but also his responsibilities as a husband and as a public figure. The situation carried weight beyond the room, extending into public perception and the reputation of the monarchy itself. For Prince William, however, the matter was even more sensitive in a different way. It was not just about present events. It was about memory, about his mother, Princess Diana, about how she was remembered, honored, and respected. For him, this was about protecting her dignity and ensuring that her legacy was not overshadowed or misunderstood. His sense of responsibility went beyond duty. It was personal, emotional, and rooted in love and loyalty. After careful discussion, a decision was made. It was not announced with drama or fanfare. There were no loud declarations or public arguments. Instead, it was firm, quiet, and final. Queen Camilla stepped away from public life. In the days that followed, the palace carefully managed how the story was presented to the outside world. Official statements were controlled, measured, and designed to maintain stability. On the surface, everything seemed calm, but behind the walls of the palace, something important had shifted. Things were no longer the same. What had once been hidden or managed had now come into the open, changing relationships, perceptions, and possibly the future itself. The impact of that private meeting would continue to be felt, even if the public never saw the full picture. A final thought. This story is more than just a royal issue or a public scandal. It is a reminder of how the past, no matter how carefully buried, can return when least expected. It shows how unresolved emotions, personal ambitions, and deep insecurities can quietly influence decisions over time, often without anyone fully realizing the direction things are heading. It also reminds us of something very powerful, the nature of truth. Truth does not rush. It does not shout. It does not force itself forward. Instead, it moves slowly, steadily, and patiently until it can no longer be ignored. And when it finally arrives, it often brings clarity, even if that clarity comes with discomfort or loss. If you were ever faced with a moment like this, a moment where truth stands on one side and loyalty, image, or reputation stands on the other, what would you choose? Would you protect the appearance of an institution, holding on to its image and stability? Or would you stand for the truth, even if it means facing consequences, criticism, or sacrifice? These are not easy questions, but history has a way of remembering the choices we make in such moments. And sometimes the hardest decisions, the ones made quietly without applause, are the very ones that echo the loudest through time. So, what do you think about what was found in Camilla's yacht? Do you think she could have a genuine reason for keeping them? We'd love to hear your opinions in the comments below. And don't forget to like and subscribe.